thanks to COVID-19, Bob Huggins' team, the West Virginia Mountaineers, have a tough road to close their year. Bob Huggins' team now will really get to see how good they are. They will have a true test. That 2-week break, thanks to the pandemic, and of course, that's never a reason why you'd want to have a 2-week break, and certainly could get a team to be very, very rusty. It forces the Mountaineers' schedule to be stacked with quality opponents to end the regular season, including back-to-back games against the top 5 Baylor Bears, who have been a class of college basketball most of this season. But maybe there's also a glass half full take. Maybe that COVID break, again, not a reason why you'd ever want to have 2 weeks off. And Bob Huggins, not a coach who ever wants to have his team not even be able to practice, because it wasn't that they just didn't play. They also didn't practice for 2 weeks. But maybe it was a blessing in disguise. That's the dichotomy. That's the double-edged sword. That's the two different sides to that break coin for the West Virginia Mountaineers that we now are getting to see right in front of us. This is another episode of Mic Drop here, of course, on Pittsburgh Sports Live. I'm your host, Mike Asti, and this one, a West Virginia Hoops edition here of Mic Drop. So, of course, also on WVU Sports Now. 2 weeks off without even practicing, not in any way would Bob Huggins, a rough, hard-nosed, old school, but also willing to adapt. He gets the most out of his players. Hall of Famer approaching 900 career wins. May have it by the time you watch this, of course. Hall of Famer. And West Virginia, very, very lucky to have the guy. He's not somebody that wants 2 weeks off, okay? Because it can lack chemistry. It can cause problems with being rusty, which even during a big victory over Kansas State, a struggling Kansas State team, the first game back after the break, yeah, they dominated Kansas State and got a big win, but you could see signs of rust. You could see them looking like they weren't in the best of shape. Culver, for example, did not look to be in the best of shape. I don't know what he did during those 2 weeks, but they weren't allowed to be there. They weren't allowed to get on the treadmill. They weren't allowed to be at the facility, and they weren't allowed to practice. Bob Huggins had really no jurisdiction outside of calling, texting, and maybe something on a tablet. Maybe Zooming like I'm doing to record this. So certainly can be a concern with kids that old, and certainly that type of player. Miles McBride looked to still be the same, really, and I've done a past show on his importance and how he's the MVP of this team and how he is needed for this team to go far and how he deserves national recognition. That's back on PSL. That's, of course, on the Mic Drop section of WV Sports Now over there in that More tab right side of the website. But the team also looks different, and they needed to mold themselves, and I'll get to how this plays in a second, but you lose Oscar, you lose a major piece, you lose one of your stars that you had tons of expectations for during his time as a Mountaineer. That becomes more of a drama than maybe we were aware of at the time. We learned an hour later after the announcement that he wasn't going to be there for a while, that he's not going to be there indefinitely throughout the rest of the season, and he's done with the program. Clearly, Bob Huggins not thrilled. The team had to get over that emotionally. They didn't play well heading into that 2-week break. They didn't play well right after that, dropping a conference game in a game they really should have won. And it changes the dynamic of the team. It changes as another rebounder. It changes losing another big body. It makes this a smaller team. Bob Huggins loves rebounding. It puts more pressure on McBride to rebound as well as shoot. It puts more pressure on Culver in general, who did not look to be in the best of shape last time we saw him. So 2 weeks off, you don't want it for many of those reasons. You also don't want it because it moved the schedule. So, yeah, they probably would have lost to Baylor if he played it right after Texas, and they weren't playing well at that time, and the emotions as well. But now it's back-to-back. So you maybe lose that one and win the other. That's been what Bob Huggins' teams have done over the years. You still win one of those. They're usually due for a top 5 regulation win during the seasons. Baylor, and then Baylor again, back-to-back. So not much of a break there in between. You could easily lose both of those 2 games. We'll see what happens. They have a critical out-of-conference game coming up in the rest of this schedule. A lot of conference games, of course, as you end the road. That makes sense. But several ranked teams, several top 15 teams as we stand, and this is a team flirting outside the top 10 again. But we'll see with what happens in those games. That's going to be a major factor for WVU. And the Baylor games are going to be a big deal. Because seeding, where you are for the NCAA tournament, where you are in the Big 12 tournament going in, going to be a big deal for this team, of course. You don't want to be dealing with their 10, 11, 9, 8 seed. You want to have an easy road as possible. This now is a team that many thought after Oscar's exit would kind of kill the rest of the year. They played well since the break, but we'll see. It forced them to change things. So on one end, you don't want the break because it requires changing so much chemistry after losing a player. It could make you rusty. We've seen signs of that. And it makes the schedule just brutal because they're stacking it, and you have to make up those games, or they certainly want to. And you already have a loss from adding Gonzaga in when you lost that game earlier in the year. Bob Huggins and fans love him, and I love him. He wants to play anybody. He'll play any day. He'll play anywhere. He'll play with a rock for a basketball if he has to. Okay? He'll play the Globetrotters. He'll play the Lakers and LeBron every day if that's what he needed to, and he won't make excuses. He won't complain. He'll expect his team to show up and play well to what he believes they can. And he gets the best out of his players. He does get the most out of his players. But it doesn't make it any easier. And I'm sure in his heart of hearts, he'd rather that not be the case because that could stack some losses if it goes one way and certainly hurt you seeding-wise and then putter away your year. Maybe to no fault of their own, but certainly they're going to have to be responsible for how they play in those games. So that's a negative of the break. The positive of the break, or the blessing in disguise of the break, even though that's why you would never want time off. And I will admittedly tell you the reason why there's more examples of why the break was bad. I don't know if I'm on this side that I'm about to get to here as I close the show. I think it wasn't great because, again, the chemistry, because you don't want to be rusty. That's not the Bob Huggins way, because of the schedule being what it is and probably looking like some losses. It's all bad. But if you want to be glass half full, if you want to give an optimistic take, if you want to prove me wrong on what I just said, and that's not true, a glass half full take would be that they were not looking good going into that break. Not only on the court, but emotionally. They're dealing with more than any other team had to deal with at that time. They just got off of previous games being scrapped because of COVID. They dealt with COVID really more than anybody else in college basketball this season. Certainly their conference has, with many teams not playing in the Big 12 during that break. Maybe they're both rusty, so that's kind of, an even keel thing for what I'm saying here too with this show. But you lose Oscar again, and that was just such a blow. That was right after the new year. Everyone in the world looking for a better 2021, and there's reasons to believe maybe we're not going to have one. We get an insurrection, we lose Hank Aaron, we lose Larry King. Some's been better, some's not. So we'll see how the rest of the year goes. And the Mountaineers, right after 2021, deal with a killer blow. It's a team that's been in the top 15 most of the year. Maybe some believe was ahead of expectations, that he wasn't phenomenal, but he was certainly someone that they were planning on relying on. They hopefully were going to get more from, and they expected a lot from when he became a Mountaineer. Seemed to fit right in with Huggins. Tons of drama there. Fran Fraschilla reporting and close to Huggins that it's been drama for a while and brewing, and I get all that. I'm not denying it. But still, it just was that slap in the face to the team. It was bad timing. And then right after that happened, you saw it bleed onto the court, their emotions. They weren't playing well. You saw them lose a game they otherwise probably should have won, that he could have helped them in. It was bad all the way around, and it did appear that maybe the season was going to be killed because of that moment. Certainly there's a lot of pessimistic Mountaineer fans out there for good reason. Probably thought this is it. This is the death nail for the season after they got to this point. It's all been really good to that point. Something got to happen. And it did. And it was confusing to fans. It was confusing to media. The more you learned, the worse it was. It didn't feel good for the program. But the break kind of has now forced that to be on the back burner. That wasn't something that was a topic of a game after the break. That's not been a topic since they've returned to action. That's not really been discussed by any of my colleagues really here. And I'm only bringing it up for the purpose of this. It's not like I'm tweeting about it every other day. It maybe was able to get swept under the rug and kind of go away because of the break. If they were playing, especially with some of those games being national televised, and they're getting a lot of these national televised games, so it'll be positive or negative. They'll get the light of playing well and help them with rankings, moves them close to the top 10 as you're seeing now, off of playing well. And they'll get the darkness, the cloud. If they don't, everyone will see it. They can't hide. And especially that, because that became national news too. And that would have been talked about. That might still be talked about, but that really would have been talked about. That kind of has been ushered away a little bit, even by national media, even when in those moments. And if they play well, and now they play well, they can get rid of it altogether. But as much as you lose chemistry, as much as you're rusty, as much as Bob Huggins doesn't want to have that time off, it might have been a blessing in disguise. It wiped away that drama. It gave him a clean slate. It might have stopped the bleeding from how bad it was at that point prior to the COVID break with the Big O's departure. So there are two sides to the coin from the Mountaineers 2-week break. Hopefully there's not another one like that. I think it's better not to have that right now, but we'll see how they play the rest of the year. It definitely forces this schedule to be brutal. Not many teams in basketball have a tougher schedule the rest of the way. The Big 12 certainly has an argument, and I talked about this in our last post-game show, and we'll have more of those as well here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, that the Big 12 is the best conference in college basketball this year. Not normally the case. Normally it's very top-heavy with West Virginia, with Kansas, maybe Texas occasionally, maybe Texas Tech occasionally, and that's kind of it. Oklahoma State in the past. But this year, it's certainly revved up. Baylor, an elite program. The Mountaineers, perennially top 15, and certainly can beat anybody. Also could lose to anyone. Kansas taking a dip from where they were. Texas Tech, a top 15 team. There's contention. Oklahoma State, there's contention around the conference. Texas can get wins. Kansas State not. But there are some bad teams in there. But there are ACC's down. Duke and North Carolina aren't ranked as we're standing now. The Pac-12 is what it is. Gonzaga's great, but no one's going to say their conference is great. The SEC's less than it was. Florida's not ranked as we currently stand. We'll see that game with the Mountaineers. Kentucky having the worst start to John Calipari's career ever, as amazing as that sounds, not what they normally are. So the Big 12, I don't think it's even a debate. It's the best conference in college basketball this year. Yeah, it's the top's better and the bottom's crap, but there's still middle-of-the-road teams that are contenders more so than other conferences, and the top is 3, 4, 5 teams deep. The other conferences don't have that. So maybe the Big 10. Maybe the Big 10 is the only other conversation. But I'm going to go with the Big 12 right now with no bias, and it's not easy for the Mountaineers. And that break makes it difficult as well as the rust. But maybe it also takes a story away, takes some drama away, and stop the bleeding from everything they were dealing with prior to the break. Once again, this was Radio Gold. We'll see how the Mountaineers season can be in terms of classification of gold or aluminum. Want to make sure to hit us up bottom of the video. Make sure to hit that subscribe button here in Pittsburgh Sports Live. It's free to do so. And thanks to all of our sponsors here throughout the Now Network. It is free to you, and you get notification anytime anything is uploaded on this channel, anything goes live on this channel, any content here on Pittsburgh Sports Live, you'll get a notification. And bottom here, also at Mike Asti 11 for me on Twitter. Feel free to come at me there on Twitter. We'll engage with you. We can keep it sane and rational, hopefully. But if you don't want to do that and you still want to catch this or anyone else's content here in PSL, anything else we do here, hit that subscribe button. You don't got to follow me then, and you'll still get notified. Make sure to follow at WV Sports Now on Twitter, at PGH Sports Live on Twitter, of course, Pittsburgh Sports Live on Facebook and all through social, and of course, WV Sports Now all through social, and at WV Sports Now again on Twitter, and of course, WV Sports Now, West Virginia Sports Now. Covers more than just WVU and the Mountaineers, by the way. Marshall now, Tom covering Marshall on a whole other beat there. It is the region. It is just not the university as well as the high school scene like on Pittsburgh Sports Now. And of course, follow the Mothership, follow throughout our family of networks. And make sure to find this show, Mic Drop, in the More section, top corner there, More. Has Mountaineers in the pros, has Big 12, has a lot of other things going on. The post-game shows, these mic drops, it's all there. Find that on WV Sports Now. And, of course, the mic drop section here, the playlist on Pittsburgh Sports Live. There's two sides to the break. No, mostly you don't want to have a 2-week break when you're trying to get in tournaments and be hot. Bob Huggins doesn't like it. I don't think it's good. I don't think it helped them. It didn't help them schedule-wise. But maybe it stopped the bleeding from not only how they were playing, but the drama. All of that remains to be seen, which is just seemingly the phrase forever for the West Virginia Mountaineers program.